My name is Letitia. I am 28 years old and I never thought my own mother would send me that text. We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now. Ha ha ha. I stared at my phone in disbelief. 500 manners away from home on a business trip to Boston. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. After years of trying to please her, this was how it ended. Before I continue with how I legally took half of our family house, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up against family betrayal. Your support means everything during these difficult stories. Growing up with my mother, Barbara was like walking on eggshells every single day. I never knew which version of her I would get when I woke up each morning. Some days she was distant but civil. Other days she would criticize everything from my appearance to my academic performance. Nothing was ever good enough. My father passed away when I was 7 years old. He was a successful investment banker who left behind substantial assets, including our family home in an upscale neighborhood. The house was a beautiful colonial style with 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a finished basement, and a large backyard with a pool. It was worth well over $1 million even back then. What I didn't know until much later was that my father had specifically mentioned in his will that 50% of the house belonged to me. After Dad died, Mom changed. Her grief transformed into bitterness, and I became the target of her frustration. She would constantly remind me how much I looked like my father, but not in an endearing way. It seemed to upset her, as if my very existence was a painful reminder of what she had lost. When I was 12, Mom married Kevin, a stern real estate developer with a son named Ryan from his previous marriage. Kevin was 56, 10 years older than my mother, and he treated our home like his own personal kingdom. He immediately established rules about which spaces I was allowed to use and when. My bedroom became the only place that felt safe. Ryan, who was 30 now, but 16 at the time, quickly became Mom's favorite. He could do no wrong in her eyes, while I remained the perpetual disappointment. Mom and Kevin would praise Ryan for getting C's in school, while my straight A's were simply expected and never celebrated. "Why can't you be more sociable like Ryan?" Mom would ask, when I preferred reading in my room instead of watching TV with them. No boy will ever be interested in a girl who hides away all the time. When I turned 15, my mother gave birth to Lauren. Suddenly, I wasn't just competing with Ryan for attention, but with a baby sister as well. Lauren became Mom's pride and joy, a second chance at motherhood that she seemed determined to get right this time. She showered Lauren with affection and gifts, while I continued to exist on the periphery of the family. In high school, I threw myself into academics and extracurricular activities, partly to build a strong college application, but mostly to stay away from home as much as possible. I joined the debate team, volunteered at an animal shelter, and maintained a perfect GPA. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, became more of a mother figure to me than Barbara ever was. "You're going to do amazing things, Letitia," Mrs. Patterson would tell me. "Your determination is going to take you far." When college application season arrived, I applied to several prestigious universities hoping for scholarships. Mom and Kevin made it clear they wouldn't contribute financially to my education. "Your father left money for that," Mom said dismissively. "Use that instead of expecting us to pay." What I didn't know then was that there was indeed money set aside for my education, part of my inheritance from Dad. But Mom had never told me about it. Instead, she had been managing those funds herself, using them for household expenses and Lauren's private preschool. By some miracle and a lot of hard work, I received a partial scholarship to an excellent university. I took out student loans for the rest, determined to make something of myself, despite the lack of support from home. During my college years, I only returned home during major holidays, and even then, the atmosphere was tense. Lauren, now a toddler, had been taught to view me as an outsider. The sister who abandoned the family to pursue her own selfish ambitions. Ryan had dropped out of college by then, but was working for Kevin's company, another point of pride for my mother and stepfather. Ryan is learning real business skills, Kevin would boast during dinner, not wasting time on theoretical nonsense. Mom would nod in agreement, adding, "Not everyone needs a fancy degree to be successful." Their words stung, but I remained focused on my goals. I graduated with honors and secured a position at a financial consulting firm in the same city as our family home. Despite having the means to rent my own apartment, I decided to move back home temporarily to save money for a down payment on my own place. It was a decision I would come to regret. The family dynamics had only worsened during my absence. Lauren, now 5, had become spoiled and entitled under Mom and Kevin's indulgent parenting. Ryan was engaged to be married, but still living at home, occupying the largest guest bedroom that had once been my father's office. Mom constantly compared me to her friends' daughters. "Sarah's daughter just got engaged to a doctor," she would say during breakfast. Or, "Janet's daughter bought her first house at 24. What you waiting for?" The irony was that I was actually doing well professionally, receiving praise and early promotions at work. But at home, I was still the black sheep, the one who could never measure up to Barbara's impossible standards. What I didn't know then was that the tension in our house wasn't just about personality clashes or parenting styles. It was about money, property, and a secret that would soon change everything between us. After graduating with my finance degree, I landed a job at Meridian Consulting, a respected firm that specialized in corporate finance strategies. My starting salary was impressive for a recent graduate, and I received glowing reviews during my first year. My boss, David Fletcher, even mentioned potential for advancement if I continued on my current trajectory. "You have a natural talent for identifying financial opportunities that others miss," he told me during my performance review. "That's a rare skill in this industry." Despite my professional success, I decided to move back into my childhood home temporarily. The housing market in our area was expensive, and I wanted to save for a substantial down payment rather than wasting money on rent. I figured a year of living with family would set me up nicely for home ownership. When I proposed this plan to Mom and Kevin, they agreed with unexpected enthusiasm. I soon discovered why they were so accommodating. On my third night back home during dinner, Kevin casually mentioned that they expected me to contribute to household expenses. "We think $2,000 a month is fair," he said between bites of pot roast. "That covers your room, utilities, and food." I nearly choked on my water. $2,000? That's more. Then I would pay for my own apartment. Mom gave me that familiar, disapproving look. "This house is in an upscale neighborhood, Letitia. You're getting a bargain." Reluctantly, I agreed to pay $1,500 monthly, still feeling it was excessive, but wanting to avoid conflict. I soon realized that while they wanted my financial contribution, they had no intention of treating me like an adult with equal standing in the household. My suggestions about meal planning were ignored. When I requested to use the dining room for a work dinner, I was told it was inappropriate. Kevin installed a camera in the hallway, outside my bedroom, claiming it was for home security. Lauren was allowed to enter my room and use my things without permission. And when I complained, Mom accused me of being selfish. "She's just a child." Mom would say, "Stop being so precious about your belongings." The situation deteriorated further when I overheard a conversation between Mom and Kevin that they never intended for me to hear. I was working late in my room when their voices drifted up from the back patio below my window. "The real estate market is hot right now," Kevin was saying. "If we sell this place, we could easily clear $1.2 million. We could buy that condo in Florida and still have plenty left over." "What about Letitia?" Mom asked, though her tone suggested minimal concern. "What about her?" Kevin replied. "She's an adult with a job. She can find her own place." I sat frozen at my desk, my heart pounding. They were planning to sell my childhood home, the house my father had bought, without even discussing it with me. Something about this felt deeply wrong beyond the obvious lack of consideration. The next day, I called my father's old friend and attorney, Harold Thompson. I hadn't spoken to him since my father's funeral, but I remembered him as a kind man who had always treated me with respect. "Harold, this is Letitia Wilson, Thomas Wilson's daughter." There was a pause on the line. "Letitia, my goodness, it's been years. How are you, dear?" We chatted briefly before I explained the situation with the house. Harold's response changed everything. "Letitia, according to your father's will, 50% of that house belongs to you. It was held in trust until you turned 25, which I assume you now are." "I'm 28, I said, my mind reeling from this revelation. "Then, legally, you own half that house. Barbara cannot sell it without your consent. I'm surprised she hasn't discussed this with you." But I wasn't surprised. This was exactly the kind of information my mother would withhold to maintain control. After thanking Harold, I spent hours researching property law and reviewing copies of documents he emailed me confirming what he had said. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to confront my mother. I chose a Sunday afternoon when Kevin was golfing and Lauren was at a friend's house. Mom was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I approached her. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the house," I began calmly. "I spoke with Harold Thompson yesterday." The wooden spoon she was holding clattered against the pot. "Why would you contact him?" "I overheard you and Kevin discussing selling the house. Harold told me that Dad left 50% of this house to me in his will. Is that true?" Her face flushed, then hardened. "Harold should mind his own business. Your father made unrealistic provisions without understanding the practicalities of raising a child alone." "So it is true," I pressed. "You've known all this time that half this house belongs to me legally." "This is my home," she snapped. "I've lived here for 30 years. I've maintained it, paid taxes on it, raised children in it with money from Dad's estate," I countered, including funds that were meant for my education. Our conversation escalated quickly. Mom accused me of being ungrateful, disloyal, and selfish. I maintained that I simply wanted what was legally mine, what Dad had intended me to have. "You were always your father's favorite," she spat eventually. "He never considered how his precious will would affect me." The argument ended with her storming out of the kitchen, but the tension in the house became unbearable after that day. Kevin started making passive-aggressive comments about entitled millennials at every opportunity. Lauren was told not to speak to me. Mom alternated between icy silence and verbal jabs about my character. Despite the hostility, I stood my ground. I consulted further with Harold and began gathering documentation about the property in my father's will. I was determined to protect my inheritance. 2 weeks after our confrontation, I left for a business trip to Boston. It was an important opportunity to present our team's financial strategy to a major potential client. I would be gone for 3 days. Little did I know that my mother was planning her own strategic move in my absence. The Boston trip was crucial for my career. Our team had spent weeks preparing for this presentation, and landing this client would mean significant bonuses and potential promotions for everyone involved. I had rehearsed my portion of the presentation countless times, memorizing complex financial projections and competitive analyses. I was in my hotel room reviewing my notes one final time before bed when my phone pinged with a text message from my mother. It was unusual for her to text me, especially since we'd barely spoken in the 2 weeks since our confrontation. I opened the message and felt my world collapse around me. "We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now." I stared at the screen, reading the message over and over, hoping somehow the words would change. They didn't. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I tried calling her immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried Kevin's number with the same result. They were deliberately avoiding me. Sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, I struggled to breathe through the panic rising in my chest. The presentation was at 9 the next morning, less than 12 hours away. I had nowhere to live when I returned home. All my belongings were locked inside a house I was now barred from entering. Somehow, I managed to pull myself together enough to finish my preparation and get a few hours of restless sleep. The next morning, I put on my most professional outfit, applied extra concealer to hide the dark circles under my eyes, and headed to the client meeting. By some miracle, I made it through my portion of the presentation without revealing the turmoil inside me. As soon as we broke for lunch, I excused myself and found a quiet corner in the hallway to call my best friend Jessica. They did what Jessica exclaimed after I explained the situation. "That's insane, and probably illegal." "I know," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't know what to do. All my things are there. My clothes, my documents, even my backup laptop and external hard drives with years of work." "First, you need to breathe," Jessica said firmly. "Second, you can stay with me when you get back. I've got that pull-out couch, remember? Third, you need to call a lawyer immediately." Jessica's practical approach helped calm me down. She was right about all 3 points, especially the lawyer. This wasn't just about finding a new place to live. This was about standing up for what was legally mine. When I returned to the conference room, my colleague Marcus noticed something was wrong. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. "Family emergency. Nothing I can handle until we get back." Word got back to David, our team leader, who pulled me aside after the presentation. To my surprise, he was incredibly supportive. "Family comes first, Letitia. The presentation went perfectly, and we can handle the follow-up questions. Take an extra day or two if you need it. Just keep me posted." His kindness nearly broke my composure, but I held it together until I was alone in my hotel room that evening. Then I allowed myself to cry, really cry for the first time since receiving my mother's text. While I was processing my emotions, my phone rang. It was Lauren. "How could you do this to Mom?" she demanded without preamble. "She's been crying for hours because of you." "Lauren, what are you talking about? Mom locked me out of the house. Because you're trying to take it away from her. Kevin told me everything. You're trying to force them to sell Dad's house just so you can get money." "That's so greedy, Letitia." It was clear my mother and Kevin had been feeding Lauren a distorted version of events. Trying to explain property law to my 25-year-old sister while she was in attack mode seemed futile. So I simply said, "That's not what's happening, Lauren. I'll talk to you when things calm down." She hung up on me. Next, I called Harold Thompson. Despite the late hour, he answered on the third ring. "Harold, it's Letitia Wilson again. I'm sorry to bother you so late, but I have an emergency." I explained the situation, including the text message, which I forwarded to him as we spoke. "This is unacceptable," Harold said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "What they've done could be considered constructive eviction, and given that you own 50% of the property, it's especially problematic." "Where are you now?" "In Boston on business. I'm coming back tomorrow." "Good. Come directly to my office when you return. We need to act quickly." Harold's confidence gave me strength. For the first time since receiving that devastating text, I felt a flicker of hope. My mother might have locked me out of the house, but she had inadvertently given me the push I needed to finally stand up for myself and claim what was rightfully mine. That night, I made a decision. No more trying to please someone who could never be pleased. No more accepting mistreatment in the name of family harmony. No more allowing others to take advantage of my desire for peace. I was going to fight back, and I was going to win. When my plane touched down the following afternoon, I took a ride-share directly to Harold, Thompson's law office in the downtown business district. The building was an imposing glass and steel structure, but Harold's office on the 12th floor was surprisingly cozy, with leather chairs and walnut bookshelves that reminded me of my father's study. Harold greeted me with a warm handshake and genuine concern in his eyes. "Letitia, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Your father would be appalled by Barbara's behavior." Those simple words of validation nearly brought tears to my eyes again, but I blinked them back. I needed to be strong now. "Before we discuss legal options," Harold continued, "I think we should see if you can access the house and retrieve your belongings. Have you tried going home yet?" I shook my head. "I came straight here from the airport. My luggage is still in the lobby." "Then let's start there. I'll accompany you to the house and document everything. If they refuse to let you in, that strengthens our case." An hour later, Harold's black Mercedes pulled up in front of my childhood home. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, the red brick exterior and white columns standing proudly against the blue sky. But it no longer felt like home. It felt like a fortress designed to keep me out. I tried my key in the front door, even though I knew it wouldn't work. As expected, the locks had indeed been changed. I rang the doorbell, and after a long moment, Kevin answered, his expression smug. "Can I help you?" he asked as if I were a stranger. "Kevin, you know why I'm here. I need my belongings." "I don't think so," he replied. "Barbara made it clear you're not welcome anymore. You should have thought about that before, threatening to take away her home." Harold stepped forward, handing Kevin his business card. "Mr. Anderson, I'm Harold Thompson, Letitia's attorney. I also represented her father, Thomas Wilson, and am very familiar with his will. Letitia owns 50% of this property, and preventing her from accessing it is unlawful. Additionally, her personal belongings inside the house remain her property." Kevin's face wrined. "We'll see about that." He closed the door in our faces. Harold calmly took out his phone and began recording. "Please note the time and date. We have attempted to access the property at 1:17 p.m., and Mr. Kevin Anderson has denied entry to Miss Letitia Wilson, who is a legal co-owner of the property according to the will of Thomas Wilson, dated June 12, 2003. We returned to Harold's car where he made several phone calls while I sat in numb silence. Finally, he turned to me. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we're filing for an emergency injunction to prevent them from selling the house or disposing of your belongings. Second, we're sending a formal legal notice asserting your property rights. Third, we're documenting everything for a potential civil suit." I nodded, grateful for his expertise and decisiveness. "What do you need from me?" "I need a detailed inventory of everything you had in the house. Documents, electronics, clothing, jewelry, anything of value. I also need any communications from Barbara or Kevin about the house. That text message is especially damning." Over the next few days, I stayed at Jessica's apartment, sleeping on her pull-out couch as promised, and worked with Harold to build our case. I created a comprehensive list of my belongings, complete with estimated values and where possible purchase receipts I'd saved in my cloud storage. Harold filed the emergency injunction, which was granted by Judge Marilyn Jones, a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for fairness. The injunction prevented Barbara and Kevin from selling the house or removing any of my personal property. They responded by hiring Robert Watson, a slick attorney known for aggressive tactics. Watson immediately filed a counter-motion claiming I had abandoned the property and forfeited my rights by moving out for college and work. Harold scoffed when he received Watson's filing. This is desperate. Temporary absence for education and employment doesn't constitute abandonment, especially when you returned and were actively living there until they changed the locks. Our case strengthened further when Harold discovered through property tax records that Barbara and Kevin had listed the house for sale with a real estate agent just one day after changing the locks. The listing had my bedroom photographed as an office space and made no mention of my ongoing residency or ownership stake. "This is perfect," Harold said, showing me the listing on his tablet. "It proves their intent to sell without your knowledge or consent, despite your clear legal interest in the property." Harold sent a formal cease and desist letter to the real estate agent, who immediately pulled the listing upon learning of the disputed ownership. 2 weeks after being locked out, we had our first court hearing. I wore a conservative navy blue suit and minimal jewelry, wanting to appear professional and serious. Barbara arrived in a floral dress that made her look more maternal than usual, clearly a calculated choice. Judge Jones began by reviewing the facts of the case. Miss Wilson claims 50% ownership of the property based on her father's will, which Mr. Thompson has provided to the court. Mrs. Anderson and Mr. Anderson claim full ownership based on years of residence and maintenance. The property is valued at approximately $1.2 million. According to recent appraisals, Barbara's attorney argued that the will was outdated and that Barbara had been led to believe she had full ownership after maintaining the property for over 20 years. "Your Honor," Watson said, smoothly, "Mrs. Anderson has invested countless hours and dollars into this property. She raised Miss Wilson in this home, providing her with shelter, food, and care. It seems remarkably ungrateful for Miss Wilson to now demand half of her mother's home." Harold countered with calm precision. "Your Honor, gratitude is not a legal concept, and parenthood does not negate inheritance law. Thomas Wilson clearly intended for his daughter to have 50% ownership of the family home. Mrs. Anderson was aware of this provision and deliberately concealed it from Miss Wilson for years, including using funds from Mr. Wilson's estate, meant for Miss Wilson's education for other purposes. The judge asked me directly, "Miss Wilson, when did you become aware of your ownership stake in the property?" "Only recently, Your Honor. About a month ago, when I overheard my mother and stepfather discussing selling the house without consulting me, I contacted Mr. Thompson, my father's attorney, who informed me of my father's will. And Mrs. Anderson, you were aware of this provision in Mr. Wilson's will." My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Yes. But Thomas didn't understand the practicalities of raising a child alone. I assume the provision was more of a suggestion than a legal requirement." Judge Jones raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment on this dubious interpretation of will law. The hearing continued with testimony from both sides. Lauren appeared as a witness for my mother, claiming I had always been distant from the family and had expressed no interest in the house until I learned of its value. Then came a surprise. My childhood friend Olivia overheard my mother years ago explicitly acknowledging my ownership stake in the house, while complaining about it to her own mother. She said, and I quote, "Thomas made sure Letitia gets half the house when she turns 25, so I'm stuck here until then, unless I want to give her a fortune." Olivia testified, "This was during a garden club meeting at our house when I was about 16, so approximately 12 years ago." By the end of the hearing, Judge Jones ordered a psychological evaluation for my mother and a full financial audit of my father's estate. She also maintained the injunction against selling the property and granted me limited access to retrieve essential personal items, supervised by a court officer. As we left the courthouse, I received a text from Jessica Robert Watson, just sent an email to your mom that got forwarded to several people accidentally. It says, "We have a problem. Call immediately. They're panicking." I showed the message to Harold, who allowed himself a small smile. They're realizing they can't bully their way out of this. The truth is coming to light, and they don't like what it reveals about their actions. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of justice on the horizon. The road ahead would still be difficult, but at least now I was fighting back. The court proceedings intensified over the next few weeks, as more details about my mother's financial maneuvers came to light. The psychological evaluation revealed that Barbara harbored deep resentment toward my father for his success and popularity feelings that had transferred to me after his death because of our close relationship and similar personalities. Our second court appearance was even more dramatic than the first. The financial audit had uncovered that Barbara had not only hidden the truth about my inheritance, but had actually misappropriated funds from my trust over the years. Money that was specifically designated for my college education had instead been used for luxury vacations, Lauren's private school tuition, and extensive renovations to parts of the house that I was rarely allowed to use. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Harold, trying to maintain my composure as these facts were presented to the court. Across the aisle, my mother avoided eye contact while Kevin whispered furiously to their attorney. Lauren sat behind them, her expression wavering between anger and confusion as she learned the truth about her parents' actions. Judge Jones addressed my mother directly. "Mrs. Anderson, these financial records indicate a pattern of misappropriation that this court finds deeply troubling. Can you explain why? You used funds designated for Miss Cotter? Wilson's education for other purposes." My mother straightened in her seat, her voice quavering slightly. "Your Honor, raising children is expensive. Letitia received scholarships for college. The money would have gone to waste otherwise. That wasn't your decision to make," Judge Jones replied firmly. "The trust was explicit in its terms." Robert Watson attempted to redirect the conversation. "Your Honor, regardless of past financial decisions, the central issue remains the current ownership of the house. Mrs. Anderson has been the primary resident and caretaker of the property for over 2 decades. Mr. Watson, Judge Jones interjected, the pattern of financial mismanagement is relevant to Mrs. Anderson's credibility regarding her claims about the property. The court will consider all aspects of this case." As the hearing progressed, Watson called Ryan to testify about family life in the house and how Barbara had been the one maintaining the property all these years. His testimony backfired when Harold cross-examined him. "Mr. Ryan Anderson, are you aware that the property taxes and major repairs for the house were paid from a trust established by Thomas Wilson, not from your mother's or stepfather's income?" Ryan looked confused. "No. I always thought Mom and Kevin paid for everything. And are you aware that they have been collecting rent from Letitia at a rate higher than market value for the area, despite her legal ownership of half the property?" They, what Ryan's surprise, seemed genuine. He turned to look at his mother and stepfather with new uncertainty in his eyes. The most dramatic moment came when Barbara took the stand again and, under Harold's methodical questioning, finally admitted that she had always known about my ownership stake but had deliberately hidden it from me. "Why did you conceal this information from your daughter?" Harold asked. Barbara's composure cracked. "Because this is my house. I lived here with Thomas for years before Letitia was born. I decorated every room. I planted the garden. Why should she get half of it just because she was his precious daughter? She was always his favorite, even though I was the one who actually raised her." The courtroom fell silent at this outburst. Judge Jones made notes while maintaining a neutral expression. I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. After all these years, I finally understood the root of my mother's treatment of me. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that I reminded her too much of the husband she both loved and resented. Following this revelation, Robert Watson requested a recess to confer with his clients. When court resumed 30 minutes later, their tone had changed dramatically. "Your Honor," Watson began after careful consideration, "my clients wish to acknowledge that Miss Wilson is indeed entitled to 50% ownership of the property as stipulated in Thomas Wilson's will. We would like to discuss settlement options to resolve this matter without further litigation." This sudden reversal confirmed what Jessica's text had suggested. "Watsons, we have a problem." Email had likely been sent after he realized they couldn't win against the clear language of my father's will and the evidence of my mother's financial misconduct. Judge Jones nodded. "I believe that's a wise decision. The court will give both parties 2 weeks to reach a settlement agreement. If no agreement is reached, we will proceed with a full trial and potential criminal charges related to the financial misappropriation." As we left the courtroom, I caught Lauren's eye. For the first time since this conflict began, she didn't look at me with anger or contempt. Instead, there was confusion and the beginning of understanding. She quickly looked away when Kevin called her name. But that brief connection gave me hope that perhaps not all family bonds were irreparably broken. Harold guided me through the courthouse hallways, his hand supportively at my elbow. "This is a significant victory, Letitia. They've admitted your ownership rights. Now we negotiate from a position of strength." "What do you think will happen?" I asked. "They'll likely propose buying out your half of the property, but I doubt they have $600,000 readily available. We might suggest a structured settlement," or he paused, considering, "or we could propose a different solution altogether." "What kind of solution?" Harold smiled. "One that gives you exactly what your father wanted you to have, while making it impossible for Barbara to avoid facing the consequences of her actions." For the first time in this entire ordeal, I felt a sense of power. Not the destructive kind that my mother and Kevin had wielded against me, but the empowering knowledge that justice was within reach. 1 week after the court hearing, we met for settlement negotiations at Harold's office. The large conference room featured a mahogany table that gleamed under recessed lighting, creating an atmosphere of professionalism and graidas. Barbara, Kevin, and their attorney sat on one side, while Harold and I occupied the other. A court-appointed mediator presided at the head of the table. "Let's begin." The mediator said, "The goal today is to reach an equitable resolution regarding the property at 174 Lakewood Drive, currently valued at $1.2 million, of which Miss Wilson legally owns 50%. Robert Watson opened with their proposal. Our clients are prepared to offer Miss Wilson $300,000 for her interest in the property payable over 5 years. This represents a fair compromise property, considering the emotional value of the home to Mrs. Anderson." Harold's expression remained impassive. $300,000 is half of what my client is legally entitled to, and the payment schedule is unacceptable. Miss Wilson owns half of a $1.2 million, that's $600,000. Not a penny less. "My clients don't have that kind of liquidity," Watson countered. "Then perhaps they should consider selling the house and splitting the proceeds equally," Harold suggested. Barbara visibly palled at this suggestion. "No, I'm not leaving my home." "It's only half your home," I said quietly, speaking for the first time. "The other half is mine," the mediator intervened. "Let's explore alternatives that might satisfy both parties' interests. Miss Wilson, what are your primary objectives here?" I took a deep breath, considering my answer carefully. "Justice and security. I want what my father intended me to have, and I want acknowledgement of the wrong that was done to me." "Mrs. Anderson, what are your objectives?" the mediator asked. "To keep my home," she replied immediately, "and to end this family conflict." After 2 hours of back-and-forth negotiations, it became clear that Barbara and Kevin couldn't afford to buy me out completely, and I wasn't willing to accept less than my full share. We seemed at an impasse until Harold presented our alternative solution: The property features a layout that could accommodate a legal division, he explained, spreading architectural plans on the table. The house has 2 floors, plus a finished basement. We propose a physical division of the property, with Mrs. Anderson and Mr. Anderson retaining the upper floor, and Miss Wilson taking ownership of the main floor and basement, which already has a separate entrance. The room fell silent as everyone processed this unexpected proposal. "That's preposterous," Kevin finally sputtered. "We can't share the house with her." "Actually, you wouldn't be sharing it," Harold clarified. "The property would be legally converted to a duplex with separate entrances, utilities, and living spaces. This solution gives both parties what they want. Mrs. Anderson keeps her home, and Miss Wilson receives her rightful inheritance." Barbara looked horrified. "I would have to live in the same building as her after everything that's happened." "After everything you've done, you mean?" I corrected gently. "And yes, that's exactly what I'm proposing. You keep the upper floor, which has 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. I take the main floor and basement, which includes the kitchen, living room, dining room, and 2 additional bedrooms. We would need to install a second kitchen upstairs for you, but that's manageable." "This is ridiculous," Kevin insisted. "Is it?" Harold countered. "Consider the alternatives. You can't afford to buy Miss Wilson out. If we proceed to trial, given the evidence of financial misappropriation, you might face not only civil penalties but criminal charges as well. This solution allows everyone to save face and move forward." The mediator nodded thoughtfully. "It's an unusual proposal, but it does address the core interests of both parties. I suggest we take a brief recess for private discussions." During the break, Barbara and Kevin huddled with their attorney, their expressions ranging from disbelief to resignation. Harold and I stepped into an adjacent office. "Are you sure about this?" Letitia Harold asked. "Living so close to them won't be easy." "I'm sure," I replied. "It's not about making things uncomfortable for them, though that might be a side effect. It's about claiming my rightful place and not being pushed out of my inheritance. Plus, the market value of that house will only increase. In a few years, my half will be worth even more." When we reconvened, Watson presented their counteroffer. "My clients will agree to the property division with several conditions. First, Miss Wilson will be responsible for all conversion costs. Second, there will be a strict set of rules regarding common areas like the driveway and yard. Third, either party will have first right of refusal if the other decides to sell their portion in the future." After some negotiation on the specifics, we reached an agreement. The property would be legally converted to a duplex, with Barbara and Kevin occupying the upper floor and me taking the main floor and basement. The conversion costs would be split equally, and we would share maintenance expenses for common areas proportionally based on square footage. 2 days later, we met at the courthouse to formalize the agreement before Judge Jones, who reviewed the terms carefully. "This is an unusual resolution," she commented, "but one that appears to honor both the letter and spirit of Thomas Wilson's will. Mrs. Anderson, are you entering this agreement voluntarily and with full understanding of its terms?" My mother nodded stiffly. "Yes, Your Honor, Miss Wilson. The same question to you." "Yes, Your Honor, I am," I replied confidently. "Then the court approves this settlement agreement. The property at 174 Lakewood Drive will be legally converted as specified, with ownership divided between Barbara Anderson and Letitia Wilson as described in the document. Additionally, Mrs. Anderson will reimburse Miss Wilson $50,000 for the misappropriated education funds payable in monthly installments over 5 years. As we left the courthouse, Lauren approached me hesitantly while Barbara and Kevin walked ahead to the parking lot. "Is this really happening? You're going to live downstairs from Mom and Kevin." "That's the plan I confirmed. It's what Dad wanted for me to have my share of the home." Lauren looked troubled. "I didn't know about the will or the trust or any of it." They never told me. I know, I said gently. It's not your fault. I said some pretty awful things to you, she admitted, not quite meeting my eyes. You believed what they told you. We can talk more about it later if you want. She nodded and hurried to catch up with our mother, leaving me with a mix of emotions. The legal battle was over, but the emotional aftermath was just beginning. The conversion of the house took 3 months to complete. New walls were built, a second kitchen installed upstairs, separate electrical meters added, and the basement entrance enhanced to serve as my primary door. Throughout the construction, I stayed with Jessica, visiting the property regularly to check on progress. Finally, the day came when I received my new keys. Keys that no one could take from me or change without my permission. As I walked through my half of the house, now officially mine, I felt a complex mix of triumph, sadness, and determination. This wasn't how I had imagined my homecoming would be, but it was a homecoming nonetheless. That evening, as I unpacked my belongings in what used to be the family living room, now my personal space, I heard footsteps on the floor above. My mother and Kevin were home just a ceiling away, but in many ways more distant than ever. This arrangement wouldn't be easy for any of us, but it was just, and sometimes justice is more important than comfort. I had stood my ground, fought for what was rightfully mine, and won. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the same determination. 2 years have passed since I moved into my half of the family home. What began as an arrangement born of conflict has evolved into something unexpected. The first few months were undeniably awkward. Barbara, Kevin, and I avoided each other as much as possible, creating elaborate schedules to prevent crossing paths in the driveway or yard. We communicated primarily through text messages about practical matters like garbage collection or shared utility issues. Lauren surprisingly became an occasional visitor to my space, gradually reopening our sisterly relationship. Our conversations were cautious at first, both of us treading carefully around family dynamics. But over time, we found common ground and shared childhood memories and similar taste in music and books. I always thought you hated me, Lauren confessed during one of her visits 6 months after I moved in. Mom always said you were jealous of me. I never hated you, Lauren, I assured her. I was hurt that you seemed to have the relationship with Mom that I never could, but that wasn't your fault. As for my living space, I transformed it completely. The formal dining room became my home office where I continued to excel in my financial consulting career. The living room, once dominated by Kevin's oversized leather furniture and hunting trophies, now featured comfortable, modern pieces in calming blues and greens. My bedroom, formerly the guest room, where distant relatives had occasionally stayed, became my sanctuary with luxurious bedding and artwork that spoke to my soul. The finished basement I converted into a combination library and entertainment area, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a comfortable sectional where Jessica and other friends could gather for movie nights or quiet conversations. It was in this space that I began hosting small dinner parties and game nights, gradually rebuilding a social life that had been sacrificed to family drama. Kevin moved out 14 months after our arrangement began. I learned through Lauren that he had been having an affair with his administrative assistant, a revelation that surprised no one who knew him well. Barbara remained in the upper floor now with more space but less financial security. She took a part-time job at a local boutique, her first paid employment in decades. My career continued to flourish. David promoted me to senior consultant with a substantial raise and increased responsibilities. I began traveling internationally for client meetings, building a reputation for creative financial solutions and unwavering integrity. The irony that these professional traits had been developed partly through my personal ordeal wasn't lost on me. I also started dating again cautiously at first. Michael, a landscape architect I met through a client, became a regular presence in my life. Unlike previous relationships where I had hidden my family complications. I was open with Michael about my unusual living situation and the history behind it. His acceptance and understanding reinforced that I deserved authentic connections based on honesty. Then came an evening I never expected. I was preparing dinner in my kitchen when there was a knock at my door. Opening it, I found my mother standing there looking smaller and older than I remembered. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual confidence. I hesitated only briefly before stepping aside. "Of course." Barbara entered, slowly, taking in my renovated space with curious eyes. "You've made it beautiful," she said finally. "Different, but beautiful." "Thank you," I replied, unsure where this conversation was heading. "Would you like some tea?" She nodded, and we sat at my kitchen table, 2 mugs of chamomile tea between us, like a neutral zone in contested territory. "I owe you an apologies," she began, after a long silence. "Many apologies, actually, but I wouldn't know where to start." "Why now?" I asked, neither accepting nor rejecting her overture. "Kevin's gone. Lauren's moving to Chicago for graduate school next month. I've been alone up there. Really alone for the first time in years." She wrapped her hands around the mug. "It gives you time to think about your mistakes." "I'm listening," I said simply. What followed was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Barbara spoke about her jealousy of the bond I'd shared with my father, her resentment of his financial success that made her feel like a failure. In comparison, her fear that I would outshine her just as he had. She admitted to hiding the will and misusing my trust fund, not just for financial gain, but to maintain control over a situation where she felt powerless. "I was wrong," she concluded, tears streaming down her face. "So wrong for so long. I don't expect forgiveness, Letitia. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did. I didn't offer immediate absolution. The wounds were too deep, the history too complex for simple forgiveness. But I did offer something else. We can try," I said carefully. "Not to go back to how things were because that wasn't healthy for either of us. But maybe we can build something new, something better if we're both willing to do the work." She nodded. And for the first time in my adult life, I saw my mother as a complete human being, flawed and fragile, but capable of change. It wasn't a Hollywood reunion with swelling music and tearful embraces, but it was authentic and in its way healing. In the months that followed, Barbara and I established a cautious new relationship. We began with small steps, occasional shared meals, or brief conversations about neutral topics. Lauren, when visiting from Chicago, expressed amazement at the change. "I never thought I'd see you two in the same room without tension thick enough to cut with a knife," she remarked during a rare dinner with all 3 of us. My professional life continued to thrive. The promotion I'd been working toward finally came through, making me the youngest director in my firm's history. Michael and I grew closer, our relationship deepening into something I could trust and value. Throughout these changes, I often reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From receiving that devastating text message to fighting for my inheritance to creating a new life literally built on the foundation of the old one, I had discovered strength I never knew I possessed. The most profound lesson I learned wasn't about property rights or legal battles, though those were important. It was about the courage to stand up for yourself, even when those who should love you most are the ones causing harm. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for self-preservation and growth. I discovered that family isn't just defined by blood, but by respect, honesty, and mutual care. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes you have to fight for what's rightfully yours, not out of greed or vindictiveness, but because your self-worth demands it. By refusing to be cast aside, by insisting on my rightful place in my father's legacy, I reclaimed not just half a house, but my dignity and self-respect. Today, as I sit in my garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I feel a sense of peace that once seemed impossible. The journey wasn't easy, and some scars will never completely fade. But I've built something valuable from the pieces of a broken relationship. I've created my own definition of home. If you've ever faced betrayal from those who should have protected you, if you've ever had to fight for what's rightfully yours, know that you're not alone. Your story matters. Your rights matter. Your dignity matters. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stand our ground even when it feels like the whole world is pushing against us. Have you ever had to stand up to family for what was rightfully yours? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding strength in difficult situations. Remember, sometimes taking back what's legally yours isn't just about property, it's about reclaiming your worth. Thank you for listening to my story. No matter what challenges you're facing, I believe in your strength to overcome them. The end. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Comment below which story you want to hear next. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.